Welcome to Whether or Not. I'm Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg, WABC-TV. In today's special edition, it's when two of my favorite things collide, weather and sports. More specifically, weather's impact on sports. For instance, will the wind be swirling at MetLife this weekend? Will the Yanks get rained out? Will the greens play a little slower in your golf round? The relationship is undeniable. I mean, in fact, I consider weather the great equalizer. So with October approaching and our two MLB teams likely playoff bound, we're going to focus on baseball today. Maybe we dabble in a few other things. My guest today lives, eats, and breathes baseball. He really has since he was a toddler. And he's here to discuss if our teams are maybe built for the fall. And by the way, he may look familiar. He used to hide under the news desk as a little boy when we were at our 7 Lincoln Square studios. And now he gets to sit across from me, ready to share his expertise. This is really a treat for me. Welcome to Whether or Not, Ethan Goldberg.
Thanks for having me. When you said your two favorite things colliding, I thought you might have been talking about me.
I absolutely should have added you in this, no question about it. By the way, nice glasses.
Thank you. Like father, like son.
And the AccuTire is pretty solid, too.
I learned from the best.
Yeah, well, don't try to soften me up. You're going to get some hard balls today. All right, so let our viewers in on your baseball background, education, training, and what you're doing now.
So my initial interest in the game can really be all thanks to you. Before I could talk or walk, I was watching games with you on the couch and at the ballpark. So just from there, my passion for the game grew, and I kind of started to see the game in a different way as I grew up. Less so as a fan and more just as an interest on how I could potentially have an impact on that game that I loved. I'm not the athlete, I'm not the player, but I see the strategy behind the game, and I'm really interested in pursuing that and building rosters and constructing things that can be successful at a high level in sports, and that's what drives me.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I was a kid, it was about building weather stations and tracking those statistics, and it was kind of fascinating to watch you taking these video games where you could build your rosters and play GM.
Yeah, absolutely. Between the MLB The Show and my little journal that I would have of pages and pages of hypothetical lineups and roster constructions, that was really the beginning of it. And being able to expand on that through my education and work has been just a really awesome experience so far.
I bet. So I'll be honest with you. I got kind of lukewarm on baseball in recent years, but I kind of been jazzed up by it a little bit more lately because, partially because of you and our discussions we have sort of post-mortem every morning on various games. But now I'm kind of excited about the exit velocity on a home run, and I'm watching the way a pitcher works his way through a game with a different lens, and that's kind of exciting to me. So can you kind of give us an idea of how this game is changing and how it kind of got the paddles put to it? It resuscitated over the past few years.
Yeah, so absolutely. Baseball is back on the upswing. Viewership is up, and the game has been exciting to a younger, newer generation of fans. Some of that can be attributed to the rule changes, the pitch clock, shortening the average time of our game, making it more accessible to the average fan. There were 80% of games before the pitch clock were over 3 hours. Now it's less than 20.
Oh, wow.
So there's a real tangible difference there. But in terms of marketing the game and kind of showing the average fan how we analyze players, not just from the eye test, but using data. Baseball has a rich, storied history of using data in its analysis. There are stat-keeping records dating back to the 1800s for Major League Baseball. And today that's even expanded upon with, like you said, exit velocities, launch angle, and all of these tools that we can do not just to measure past performance, but to predict future performance.
So, and when you're looking at players, some purists will just say, all right, it's just becoming such a numbers-driven platform. And I always will come to you sometimes, we'll argue back and forth and say, well, what about the eyeball test? Is that still something that is in play when you're analyzing players?
Oh, I think the eyeball test is absolutely, there's a lot of merit to it. But what I will also say is I think analytics sometimes gets maybe portrayed as this thing that's independent from the eyeball test. But really, analytics is just another word for information. And the information that we can get will most often corroborate what you see on the eyeball test and explain and even elaborate on things that aren't necessarily visual in the eyeball test, like small differences between two hitters when you're comparing guys that have similar pass production. And using that to predict future performance can be helpful when two players who might have similar track records, but future paths could look very different.
All right, let's bring our two worlds together now, because when we were discussing this, you were talking a lot about the science of all these analytics. And let's bring weather into the discussion a little bit, because that's now starting to enter the metrics.
Absolutely. So a big part of how player evaluation takes place, especially on the pitching side of the ball, but also on the hitting side of the ball, is ball tracking data, and essentially looking at how the ball moves through the air. And different pitchers are able to spin the ball differently and basically make the ball move in different ways that can be unpredictable to hitters. And this can all be measured through radar and optical tracking systems, where they do complex mathematics and physics to basically predict how the ball is going to move. This is called Magnus force. So different types of spin on the ball will cause it to have different movement. Backspin will cause a baseball to stay up longer. So you look at fastballs, and that's why a fastball will stay at the top of the zone versus a curveball that drops last second is because of topspin. And then there are other impacts, but that primarily is what you're looking at when you're looking at a pitcher's performance, is how well are they able to spin the ball, create unique movement that can be difficult for hitters to pick up.
Okay, so when we start talking about, because now obviously we're changing season, we've gone through the warm summer months, we're getting toward October baseball. Could that favor one team or another depending on their player personnel? You were telling me a really fascinating story when it came to Severino and how those metrics and weather relation might have impacted him.
Yeah, so in the NLCS last year, there were some pretty big pitching performance differences between the games being held at Citi Field and the games at Dodger Stadium. Pitchers like Walker Buehler and like Luis Severino were experiencing higher levels of movement on their fastballs and sweepers. Specifically, Severino was able to get sweepers with 5 more inches of horizontal break than average, which means it's moving away from hitters much faster and more difficult for them to get on plane and get hits. So you saw him have some good performances in the playoffs. This can actually be attributed to some of the wind direction at Citi Field. If there's a slight headwind, it's not necessarily impacting the ball enough to increase home runs.
Okay.
But the wind resisting that ball force going to the plate will give it more time to move, more wind resistance, and actually cause the balls to break more.
I remember that what was that saying with a knuckleballer throwing? It was like, if it's high, let it fly type stuff. And because obviously knuckleballer with wind in his face had much more control. And Ethan, another player that you observed with maybe some weather impact in his game, Ryan McMahon.
Yeah, absolutely. So his recent acquisition from the Colorado Rockies brings up a lot of weather-related questions on player performance. So McMahon playing at Coors Field was a victim sometimes, and sometimes benefited from what's called the Coors effect.
Okay.
And Coors Field, being a mile above sea level, has less dense air. That not only causes the ball to fly 6 to 8% further on batted balls, but it diminishes what we previously talked about, the Magnus effect on the ball. So per basically its spin rate, the ball will move less at Coors Field. That makes it easier for hitters to pick up. So McMahon might struggle with breaking pitches outside of Coors Field as he adjusts to a new Yankee Stadium environment, or high carry fastballs at the top of the zone he could struggle with. However, he's a lefty, so at Yankee Stadium he could he could potentially adjust his profile to maybe get more launch angle pull side power and make up for some of that lost production leaving Coors Field.
Interesting. So let me say you're playing GM for Team A. Is there a case where if you're working in a particular region of the country or a particular stadium that you may try to acquire a player in one instance, but if you were in a different geographic area of the U.S., you might not try to acquire that player?
Oh, absolutely. There are certainly pitchers and player profiles that will fit better to certain elevations or even ballpark dimensions. So you see the Yankees stack their lineup with power-heavy lefties to take advantage of a shorter right field when their center field is very deep and their left field is deeper. The opposite with the Boston Red Sox. They like guys who can spray the ball off the wall because they have a short left field and turn some of those flyouts into doubles. So there's certainly that environmental consideration, and you see it in advanced stats such as Park Factor on Baseball Savant, which is a website that shows all sorts of different publicly available advanced stats. Park Factor essentially measures how much offensive performance is enhanced or decreased by the park environment. So you can see how the game changes based on where it's being played.
Is that like what we hear when watching a cast and say, oh, this would have been a home run in 3 out of 5 MLB stadiums?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, got it. Something about, because you've talked a lot to me about like the diamond in the rough, and one of the things that you think is your strengths is finding that player that you think is cut to be able to maybe learn some of these strategies moving forward that maybe isn't clear cut to, be an MLB player initially, but you're looking at it saying, whether it's physically or how do you judge that before I just put all that stuff out there?
So baseball is a sport with a normal distribution of outcomes. So a lot of the outcomes are very centered towards the average. You'll see a lot of similarities between a lot of the average baseball players. What you're trying to look for is outliers. Well, whether that's an outlier with a pitcher with a really weird arm angle that produces weird movement, or someone with an outlier bat speed that can produce exit velocities like a Giancarlo Stanton. So you're looking for those outliers, and you're looking for those traits and projection on how they can develop.
Okay. Can you speak to why, for instance, like, we've been watching Tolle on the Red Sox. The Mets seem to have a new phenom. Why do you see those players so successful in their early going?
So last week, interestingly enough, we had Jonah Tong and Peyton Tolle debut on the same night for the Red Sox and the Mets. Both of them are considered to have 80-grade fastballs. For non-baseball fans, pitches can be graded on a scouting scale of 20 to 80, and 80 is elite, the best of the best. However, their fastball profiles are completely different. Tong is 95. His release is very over the top, so he's downhill. Tolle gets good extension, so he reaches down the mound really far and releases from a low height. So the ball kind of looks like it has that rising effect. Both of these players are outliers on either extreme, but they're both, because they're on those extremes, they're able to perform at a high level.
That's fascinating. Okay, where do you see the future of this going? Because obviously you are in this era now of like exponential analysis. Where do you see it headed?
I think, like a lot of things, you need to watch out for the incorporation of AI into analysis. And in an industry where you're using large data sets and you potentially have AI to enhance and basically streamline those processes, and then also just give you larger and larger data sets for analysis. And much of baseball operations at the professional level is computer modeling. So just being able to successfully develop those computer models and potentially enhance them with AI should be a form of competitive advantage for organizations in the future.
I could have probably given you a similar answer. Someone asked me, what's the future of weather forecasting? So yeah, there's more than one bridge going on here. So as we go into the cooler months now, let's transfer it over to hitting a little bit. Do you see anything with that type of impact as we get cooler and more dense air coming in?
Yeah, so absolutely. We know that denser air, cooler air is going to inhibit ball flight. The common saying is that the bats get hot in July, and that warm air will cause the ball to carry a lot further. So some home run launch angle heavy teams might see some of their short porch home runs fall and be flyouts in some situations in the fall. Teams that maybe play more slapstick brand of baseball might be able to have more sustainable success in that way, and be a little bit more resistant to weather changes.
Okay, so when we talk, let's now bring it to our teams here in Mets and Yankees and their stadiums. Any observations or any thoughts as we head toward the fall, if you were scouting and saying, if we're talking weather dependent and the weather being an equalizer here, what does their fate look like as we get into the cooler month?
So it's actually interesting. We spoke about how in the fall we're getting a more northwest wind in the New York area. And Citi Field and Yankee Stadium actually have slightly different orientations.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that swirling wind that you talked about at Citi Field being closer to the water and being more oriented northeast versus the Yankee Stadium would maybe knock down some fly balls. But for the Yankees, that northwest wind could be blowing out to the short porch and right and help some of those righty batters potentially tap into even more power.
Yeah, because the Yanks, I mean, they've been described by some as kind of boom or bust. You know, they're either home runs, but they're not necessarily going station to station. So they need that weapon headed into the postseason. So maybe it knocks down some of the fly balls to left field and center versus right. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. The elephant in the room that I wanted to talk about, because so many of my viewers over the years know that I'm a hardcore Red Sox fan. And let's first say, where do your allegiances lie?
I'm a Red Sox fan.
Okay. So we have to acknowledge that. But, you know, even though we're diehards and 2004 happened, I mean, could you ever see yourself working for the Yankees?
My goal is to work a long career in baseball operations, and the Yankees, as much as I've grown up hating when they've won and being their rival, I can respect the organization and really how they're on the cutting edge of analytics in baseball. And you see this pipeline of young pitching that they're able to produce, and it's really impressive. And so I'd have to put my hat away for a second and be a professional. I'm fortunate right now to work for a New York area team, the New York Boulders, and my Boston allegiances haven't stopped me from cheering for their current playoff run. So, yeah, the answer would be, yeah, I know that might be a little upsetting.
Even at the expense of maybe compromising our relationship, it would be okay, huh? I get that. Back to the New York Boulders, something exciting here. I wanted to sort of get your feel. Listen, I know when I nail a forecast, you know, how wonderful I feel the next day, or if I've helped a viewer through a severe weather situation. What's the gratification like for you? Because I know you just went through it in the playoffs. When you do a scouting report and it helps some of your players succeed, and you know that it was directly related to some of the observations you made.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really great feeling, and like you said, you can definitely relate to that with how much you're helping your viewers. And but yeah, you get up and you see a hitter hit a home run on a pitch that you told them in the scouting report that pitcher likes to go to in that situation, and it feels good knowing that you could contribute from an off the field place.
Your New York Boulders made the playoffs, and you know, we're recording this here in early September around playoff time in the Frontier League, and you might be set for a little road trip.
Yeah, so we have Game 2 tomorrow night against the Quebec Capitals in Quebec City. And me and some of my coworkers are in the midst of potentially planning a drive up for Game 2. So
loyal fan, that is great stuff. This has been a lot of fun, Ethan. Really special for me to kind of watch you flourish in this role, and excited to see where things go. But thanks for joining us, whether or not. And I guess you know, depending on how the forecast goes as we head into the MLB postseason, maybe we'll tap into some of your expertise and see what you think about the games and how the teams might fare. But I appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. I'd love that. Thank you so much for having me on.
You got it. That is this edition of Whether or Not. It's been a really fun one. And of course, We have our long format, whether or nots, that we'll keep issuing on some topics. Feel free to suggest some topics you'd like to get into in more depth. Of course, we're getting into the peak of tropical season. We're going to be addressing that as well as looking at the fall and winter forecast. You can also get your whether or not daily discussions. They're roughly about 5 minutes long, and I go in depth on not only the 7-day forecast, but the long range and any interesting weather phenomena that are happening. So you can always catch that on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, your daily AccuWeather forecast on all of our platforms. That is this edition of Whether or Not. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.